Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is the Narcissistic Resistance, and this resistance video is a partially sponsored video sponsored by Lou for Bags Packed, who did make a small donation, and here's her story. Dear Ollie, I'd like to remain anonymous. You may refer to me as Bags Packed. My donation is quite small, so I'd like this video to be partially sponsored since it's so lengthy. I would send more money if I had it, but I think you will see in my story why this isn't feasible for me right now. I really appreciate your work nonetheless and hope to send another story regarding my mother's side soon. The relationship with my father and grandmother came to a head in 2015 when I decided to go no contact. What spurred that decision was a feud over a car loan that my grandmother co-signed when I was finishing college in April 2014. It had been a long time coming. I revealed to her in March 2015 I could no longer afford to make payments on the car and I needed help selling it. She refused to help me, claiming that she didn't have a dime to spare. I found this hard to believe, seeing as my grandmother is retired, lives off 2 Social Security checks, and owns a 3-bedroom, 2,500 square foot home and 2 vehicles. I initially asked if I could have her truck, but she said she wanted to keep it. She agreed to co-sign a vehicle for me as long as it wasn't new. At the time, I lost my per diem job that paid $10 an hour, no benefits, and was soon to be unlawfully evicted from a horrible living circumstance. My grandmother asked why I couldn't get a high-paying job in my field. I'm a liberal arts major in my early 20s. I don't know what job you're going to get in liberal arts right now. I mean, but that's a subject for another video. But she agreed to co-sign the loan, but then she wants to stick you with it at the end. I mean, that doesn't make sense unless she has an ulterior motive. A couple months later, I found another job and a cheaper place to live, but still couldn't afford car payments. I called my grandmother on Mother's Day to ask for some help, either selling the car or taking over the payments for a while. She refused. The conversation turned into a nasty argument, with her denying any responsibility or understanding of the situation she put us in. I tried to explain what options she had, but she wasn't hearing it, only blaming me for my poverty. She recommended that I ask my mother, who was bankrupt and briefly homeless, and in fact had no option but to live at her own home for several months prior to this, for help. At that point, I really lost it, Ollie. I asked why my father couldn't help, considering all the back child support he had owed. I was careful not to curse or demean her, but the conversation escalated. I remember her clearly saying, "I ain't giving y'all nothing," and hanging up the phone. That explains that. My anxiety after that conversation was through the roof. I was already under immense stress and began self-destructing. I soon had no choice but to leave that untenable situation and return to my home state to live with my mother in a small apartment, which is what your grandmother wanted anyway, because your grandmother hates your mother. Within a few miles of my father and about 20 from my grandmother. I've been living here ever since, 2 years now, while maintaining no contact. At this point, it's safe to say that my family has pretty much collapsed. If my mother didn't have this apartment and her job, I'd probably be on the run or dead. But let me give a bit of background. My grandmother had my father in 1960 out of wedlock when she was 19. My father's true paternity is a deep, dark family secret and the source of toxic shame. I did not discover this truth until I was about 17. I still have no idea who my biological grandfather was, and I have a burning urge to confront my grandmother about it someday, even if it means breaking no contact. My grandmother essentially abandoned my father and left him at her parents until he was about 4 years old. It was around this time she married and they moved out of state with my father. Right, she wanted to find a husband without the attachment of a kid. I wouldn't be surprised if she got herself pregnant with the next guy before she let him know she had your father. They soon had another son, my uncle, there you go, who has Down syndrome. Yeah. Your grandmother trapped. Okay, she trapped the guy you probably knew as your grandfather. Apparently, my father was held responsible for a lot of his care growing up. I don't know how much of my father's up. I don't know much about my father's upbringing, but I suspect it was fucked up and abusive. While the relationship with my father has waxed and waned over the years, though I now realize he's a completely dysfunctional individual, I have never liked my grandmother at all. As a young child, my brother and I loathed visiting her home. In fact, one instance, we hid from our grandfather who arrived to pick us up for a visit. My parents ended up having to call the police to find us, and we went to my grandmother's house anyway. What kind of person would not take their toddler hiding from their grandparent as an indication that something not right is going on? Yeah, you would think, right? My grandmother has always had a sinister and resentful vibe about her. She has two modes when she's speaking to my brother and I: baby voice or mean voice. She is not well read, quite lazy, and gullible. Obviously, she is also inclined to play victim or cover things up. When I was a young child, she was very rough when styling my hair and was extremely controlling about my appearance, how long we could use the bathroom, how much food we had to eat. She was very rough at bath time and would scrub our ears and our genitals to the extent it was uncomfortable. Telltale sign of abuse. That stuff Charlene's mother used to do to her as well. I'm still not sure if this qualifies as molestation. It does. But there was something not right about it. If it didn't feel right then, it wasn't right. I do remember her beating my younger brother with a belt, which was quite traumatic for me to witness. I couldn't have been more than 4 at the time. I believe that I too was beaten as well, but I've honestly blacked out a lot of memories visiting her home in early childhood. When I was about 11, several months after I started menstruating, I remember her peering into the stall I was using at a public bathroom, then inexplicably went to the grocery store and she bought a bag of pads which she put in my guest bathroom. I felt violated and ashamed. I also recall walking into the kitchen one morning and my grandfather's, who has since passed away, Pomeranian, laid dead on the kitchen floor. My grandmother kneeled over it and said, "I think she's dead." I was shaken. She then proceeded to ask if I was ready for breakfast without a tear in her eye. Ollie, I'm not exaggerating when I said she stepped over the dog's dead body and immediately proceeded to scramble some eggs. Yeah, she probably killed it. She had even suggested we bury the dog before she served breakfast. It wasn't until early afternoon that we put it to rest in the backyard. It was so sick and twisted. There was never any real communication or healthy emotion expressed in her household, mostly just sitting around the television and an almost palpable sense of toxicity all around. I remember once asking a psychic about my grandmother. She indicated that she was indeed mean and that she perceived some sort of trauma in my grandmother's past. I do believe she has major unresolved PTSD case. Back to my father, definitely my grandmother's son. I actually believe he hates my grandmother and manipulates her for personal gain. He did quite well in school and was a star athlete. He got a scholarship to a public Ivy and majored in chemistry in hopes of entering med school. When he flunked the MCATs, he turned to drugs, partying, and womanizing as a way of supporting himself. Though he was quite handsome, intelligent, he could be very charismatic. My mother has confided that many of her close friends did not like or trust my father when they began dating off and on in the mid-'80s because of his narcissistic qualities. I also discovered when I was 17 that he was charged with trafficking cocaine a few months before I was born. Somehow, someway, which is still unclear to me, he was bailed out and acquitted. As a young child, my mother was the breadwinner and my father would watch us while she worked. Only most of my memories of him passed out on the couch or frequenting the homes of many of his sketchy friends. Oh, So your father's basically a Call of Duty was a Call of Duty captain. A few times I snuck out of the apartment. He did not provide adequate supervision, but I was still very attached to my father as a young child. He could not hold a job and was a serial cheater. My parents' doomed marriage began to frizzle when I was about 5. I remember my father beating my mother, yelling, screaming, and throwing fists. We ended up having to stay with the relatives for a while before they separated. After my mother, brother, and I moved hours away, it seemed like years before we saw him again. I actually believed he was dead for a while. This was a very traumatic time in my life. Throughout this period of parental alienation and eventually some limited contact visits, my father refused to pay child support, with the exception of a period of 4 months when my mom lost her job back in 2006. He never supported us in any way. In fact, it was probably his girlfriend, i.e. domestic servant, who paid his child support. When it was all said and done, he owed about $70K, which my mother ultimately went to court to forgive after her financial fallout. Without consulting my brother or I, she says he claimed that it would give her she says he claimed he would give her the cash up front if she would take the matter out of the court system so he could go abroad and make money. He even had his lawyer claim that he helped pay for my college tuition in court, which my mother did not challenge. It was all a lie. In short, my father is a narcissistic deadbeat. He is also an alcoholic, abusive, and possibly an addict. He has an explosive temper and seems unable to take responsibility for anything. My mother's cousin, who goes to one of the same gyms as my father, has told my mother that rumors were going around that he battered his ex-girlfriend. I remember meeting this woman when my father lived with her a little over 15 years ago, and she was very sweet. I have no doubt that it's true. When I was younger, I wanted to believe that my father was a normal adult. Over the years, that has been shattered. When I was a teen, I stole a pinch of my father's weed, which I discovered was laced with PCP. It was the most terrifying experience of my life. There was another incident when he refused to buy my brother and I lunch because we had just gotten our Christmas money. He gave us about $25 each, then headed straight to the liquor store. It was unreal. I started arguing with him and threatened to jump out of the car. He drove us to our grandmother's house and hid the alcohol. My grandmother denied that anything had happened, though. She doesn't like him drinking there. I actually remember him drinking mouthwash under the sink on one occasion. There were many traumatic, drama-filled holidays and visits with my father. But one incident that's seared into my memory is the 4th of July after I graduated from high school. My father was acting strange, and I could tell he was a ticking time bomb. We went to the neighbor's pool there, and he began insulting my brother and I. He made lewd comments about my body and told us we were weak, spoiled brats, etc. I felt uncomfortable and returned to my grandmother's house worrying about my brother. Soon I heard the door slam and my brother crying. Then my father came in yelling and screaming. He hurled racial slurs at my brother. We are mixed, he is black, and has never been involved with a black woman, which I think is indicative of resentment of his mother. He even called his own mother a bitch and stated that you've been lying for years. When I said that explains that, when your grandmother wrote, I ain't helping y'all with nothing, I knew it. I knew it right there and then. I said, there's the problem. There's the problem. I said there was over the resentment of your mother. It's the skin tone. This is another example of another mixed race child destroyed by narcissism, destroyed by all of this, lacking in an identity. A reference to his paternity. My grandmother threatened to call the sheriff, then called his domestic servants and told her to come pick me up, you stupid bitch. Like lightning, she came and got him. That evening, my grandmother played it off as though nothing had happened at all. Well, he went out and he knocked up a white bitch, and your grandmother wasn't having it. And that was her. And it was probably worse when you were born because, and unfortunately to say this, black grandmothers hate mixed race grandchildren. Hate them. They get jealous. They're jealous of the skin. They're jealous of the hair, whatever. And I have no idea what you look like. But this is a problem that I see repeatedly within mixed race children and even in all black, with my black female subscribers as well. This is just mean. This is just another mean black. It's almost like a black Cinderella, another black Cinderella. A few months later, when I was in college, my father played the cancer card. It was very benign prostate cancer, but he made it seem like his life was on the line. That way he could garner as much sympathy as possible from my mother, grandmother, and his domestic servant. I kept up my boundaries. Coincidentally, I had sent him a long letter explaining why I didn't want him in my life and that he needed serious therapy. He denied that he ever received it, which I suspect is a lie. I wish I hadn't invited my grandmother and father to my college graduation, because in retrospect, neither really deserved to be there. My father didn't even bother getting a real card, just a Holiday Inn card with a couple $100. That was pretty much all he put into my college education. I guess it was pretty obvious why I've chosen to go no contact. There are many other stories and details I could share. The day after my grandmother hung up the phone on me, she sent me an email saying that I could be really disrespectful to her and that she doesn't understand the contract she signed. Then she asked for my checking account number so she can wire a bit of money with no apology or request for some clarity on the situation. I sent her a long email back expressing how I felt and that I had no intention of visiting her or contacting her after her disrespect. I knew I was potentially sabotaging whatever inheritance I may have been designated, as I'm her only granddaughter, but I just don't care anymore. My brother also decided to go no contact. In 2016, my grandmother sent a priority letter to my mother, which arrived on my brother's birthday, explaining that she thought I was trying to hurt her by not making my car payments. A few days later, she sent a belated birthday card to my brother, begging him for forgiveness with a $50 check. He burned the check and decided to go no contact as well. Good, because this is what happens when the narcissist money no longer has an effect on you. When you can move past the narcissist money, you're truly free. It was around this time that my father called me as my grandmother's guard dog. He warned that I need to make my payments or my credit would be ruined, etc. I suggested that he help make the payments. He then claimed that he and his mother, not my maternal side of the family, had raised my brother and I, supported us throughout. Delusional much? He was screaming, cursing, incoherent. When he hung up on me after I asked him a simple question, I decided it was time to go no contact. I haven't reached out to him since. And he's still controlled by his mommy's money. Like you said, nothing more than his mommy's attack dog. Oh, there's plenty of black son husbands, believe me. Believe me. At this point, my grandmother has been making late payments on the vehicle. It has been towed to my friend's junkyard as the transmission is out and needs to be replaced. That's $2,000 I can't afford. I can't even afford the taxes on it right now. Since I'm no contact and my grandmother has not apologized to me, she is unaware of the situation. Yet she continues to make the payments because her credit score is still very much important to her. Which is what I said at the beginning. It didn't make sense that she wouldn't help you. She wanted to keep that car as an anchor to you, as you. But when I was facing hunger and homelessness, she didn't have a dime to spare. Yet she has me out to be spoiled and tries to make me feel guilty because of my vulnerable financial situation. I'd like to go ahead and have the car voluntarily repossessed, but that requires my grandmother's signature. I am dreadfully underemployed and flat broke most of the time. My life feels as if it's at a complete standstill and there is no joy here. Sometimes I feel like my family is cursed and have to break it before I can move on with my life. I am convinced my only hope at this point is finding good work is to expatriate to Asia, which I intend to do. Oh, you're Asian. Ah, no wonder oh, no wonder. So that would make you Blasian. No wonder there's the hatred. There's the hatred. Which I intend to do in the next couple months. This, despite the fact that I live in the Research Triangle, which is supposedly a good area for jobs, not necessarily true. I think getting as far away as I possibly can from this place is the best thing I can do for myself right now. Okay, if you're in research, I thought you said you had a liberal arts, but if you're some sort of researcher, I don't know. I don't know much about it. I don't know much about what you're doing. I just don't feel comfortable living so close to my family. My nightmare is living my life as an isolated, impoverished, toxic kind of person like my father and grandmother. I feel the only way I can do this is by cutting ties, including this car loan. I know I will have to make a decision too soon, even if it means towing the car to her house and letting her deal with it. That was going to be my exact suggestion to you. She's already making the payments. Have the car towed to her house and let her deal with it. That's the whole point of a co-signer. They're supposed to be responsible if something happens. That's why you co-sign a loan. See, this whole thing with everybody forgets what the whole point of a co-signer is. That's their job as the co-signer, to pick it up if something happens. The reason why you couldn't get a loan is because things like this can happen to you. This is your grandmother trying to duck her co-signer responsibility. The responsible thing for you to do at this point is to drive the car, is to get the car to your grandmother and let her deal with it. What would you do? Am I wrong by going no contact? Best wishes, bags packed. You're finding, okay, the further away you get from your grandmother's money and your father and all that, the freer you are. The freer you are. And I guarantee you, whether or not you're successful or not, financially, what you want to be, okay, you have no chance of coming out of that impoverished state with these people in your life, because your grandmother's only going to throw anchors on you. If she had 2 cars and she's there by herself, why would she saddle you with a goddamn car payment? If she cared, she did this to you for a reason. It's like when my parents leased me a car at 19 years old in 1992. It was a $305 car payment for a 19-year-old, and it was nothing more than an anchor as a means of control. Look, your grandmother's got many, many issues. She's jealous of your mother. She's jealous of you. She's jealous of your mixed race. She uses money to control the situation, and your father is the perfect attack dog son husband. Return the car. If Asia and move as far away as you can, and don't look back, because this is not going to get better with these people in your life. Fuck the apology. She's not going to apologize, and if she did, it's going to be meaningless. Fuck the apology. You don't need it. The further you get away from your grandmother's money, you get away from her control, and that will bring you your freedom that you want, mentally and hopefully financially. So, thank you to Lou for partially sponsoring the video. Thank you, Bags Packed, for your small contribution and your story as well. I really hope this helped. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comments section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, a narcissist you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, or a Facebook chat, or you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or you just want to sponsor the channel in general for equipment, see it grow, keep the lights on, pay the rent, and just see it all expand, that's great as well, because this channel is sponsored 100% by contributions from all of you. Without you, this fails. So you know what to do with the PayPal and email links in the description box. And if you're still unclear, wait for the video, the instructional video link to pop up on the screen at the end of this video to walk you through all that. And if you're not seeing that link, it's because you probably have your pop-up blocker on. So take that off and the link will pop up. Please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been the Narcissistic Resistance. Take care.